So your production company is SAG. What were you saying? SAG?
Yeah, so we would be, we would have to do what's called guild signatory, which means that so as a producer, we wouldn't be represented by a guild, but we work with people who are represented by the guild, whether it be SAG or whether it be WGA or whether it be DGA or even IATSE or the Teamsters. And so, we would go through the process with the unions of making sure that our productions are within the contract guidelines as laid out by the various contracts with the various unions.
Gotcha.
We're in the middle of that process right now, actually on a fairly large project, but everything's kind of gone on hold.
Oh, right.
While we're waiting for the new contracts because we don't have contracts.
Oh my goodness. So even though your production company is not, you're not SAG per se, you're just
right, because again, I'm not an actor, I'm a director.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because I never knew how that
SAG is
worked.
just the Screen Actors Guild.
Is there a one for directors?
There is. It's the DGA, and they just they resolved their contracts earlier last month.
Okay, so the writer strike affects them too. Should. Right?
Yeah. So essentially, I think of it almost like
actor strike.
I think as the guild. The guilds protect individual groups. So you have the WGA, which protects the writers. You have the DGA, which is for directors. It's also for ADs. It's also for second unit directors. And I think production managers are also under the DGA. UPMs would be under the DGA.
Yeah.
And then you have SAG-AFTRA, which is for actors.
Actors, yeah.
And then you have like IATSE, which would be for cam ops.
Wow.
And
I didn't realize there were so many guilds.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I guess
gosh.
it makes sense.
And even within IATSE, there are dozens of guilds within IATSE that represent different departments. So you have you literally have a department that's just for cam ops. A guild specifically for cam ops and ACs. You have one that's for production designers and art people. And so it gets very so when you're setting up a production, you have all of these different guilds that have all these different agreements that you have to sort through before you can build a budget.
Yeah. Holy cow.
So yeah, it's quite a process.
Yeah. I feel like I'm just like starting to learn it, especially like with the podcast, it's like I'm learning the editing aspect of everything and the directing and all that.
Well, I think the key thing to know right now is don't do anything that would be counter to the guilds, because right now is the time where people get blacklisted.
Oh my goodness. You're right.
Now, SAG has been great. They put out a great PDF 2 days ago that has a listing of what you can do and what you can't do, and things like commercial and things like that. They're totally fine.
You can't even do press junkets or anything like that.
Right, but you could do right for acting. You can do commercials, and you can do new media. You can do concept. You can do things like that.
Yeah.
What you can't do is like for the anything for the major studios. You can't do acting for film or television.
Yeah.
So I would as somebody who's you can do, it depends on the, saying voiceover work is a little broad.
Yeah.
You can do voiceover work for commercials, but you can't do voiceover work for film.
Yeah.
So I would go through and read that right now, because if you have aspirations of being a SAG actress, you're going to want to not do anything that would be scabby right now.
Yeah, because I'm SAG eligible, and they've been sending me letters. They're like, you need to join, and I'm like, I don't think so yet. So I unfortunately, or fortunately, I guess in this case, I'm not under the guild, but I still don't want to do anything that could jeopardize.
Right. Well, and I think the reason we're in North Carolina. North Carolina is right to work state. Yeah. The reason you join a guild, especially SAG, and I think SAG is probably one of the few ones that I'd be like, consider joining that, is there are certain productions. For instance, let's say a certain production company was able to attract a Disney Plus show to come and shoot in Raleigh. Yeah. The actors and actresses associated with that show would almost certainly all have to be SAG.
Yeah.
Because there's an expectation from the studios that comes with upholding their deals with the various unions.
Yeah.
There's no downside to joining SAG besides maybe paying the dues and that. It certainly does a lot to help your reputation, because not just anybody can be in SAG.
Right.
To be SAG eligible means there's a certain amount of work that you put into your craft. But being a right to work state, you can also work non-SAG projects.
Right. Like in Georgia, it's also right to work, and you can work non. But we'll get a little bit more into that in just a minute. But yeah, I mean, there's just so much.
It's a big world.
Yeah, it's a big world, and especially in the film world. It's a big film world too. But well, hi, welcome back. And if you're new, this is Life and Art with Nicole, and I'm your host, Nicole. I'm here today with my friend Peter, and Peter is a producer, director, and you run 541 Company, president, right? Would that be your title?
Sure. I don't even know if I have a title.
Okay, well, he runs 541
I'm a director. That's what I like to call myself.
Director with 541 Company, and today we are going to just chat about all things film and television and film stuff.
Okay, before we do that though, where'd you get the name for your podcast?
I wanted to do a podcast that was kind of centered around topics like lifestyle topics like books, writing, acting, music, television, health, wellness, spirituality, which is like kind of like my slogan for the podcast. But I guess I decided on the name because I wanted to focus on art, specifically, music, acting and all sort of art forms in that sense. And then the life aspect was just, I don't know, chat with friends and colleagues about life and how their art fits into life, or just, what's happening and in the world and how it's affecting us. And I don't know, I just figured Life and Art with Nicole would be like a fun name.
Yeah. Have you found anybody yet who their art truly fits into their life and doesn't own it and dominate it?
I don't know. I know, right? It's like hard. It's almost like life and art. It's like one word, like it's not even two words.
The art of life.
Right.
Figuring out how to fit your art into life.
Right. But
it's going to very quickly turn into a therapy sessions with Nicole.
And that's like kind of what it is. Like, it's like, we're just going to talk, and you want to lay down, definitely do so. And let me put my glasses on and get my notebook out. But stay tuned. We've got a really exciting episode. And yeah, we'll be right back. Okay, so how did you get into directing? Like, what kind of drove you into that?
I think there was probably a point in my career I didn't know there was anything other than directing. I've always, that's always what I've wanted to do. And I've had such a great career in that I've gotten to do a little bit of everything. The first feature I ever worked on, I was a boom operator. And I walked around for an entire summer in the South Carolina heat holding a boom pole over my head.
Oh my goodness.
And then, the next major project I worked on, I was like a third AC. I got to load film cameras, and I got to, walk things from one side of the set to the other. So I've worked multiple departments, and I've gotten the opportunity to see and do a lot of different aspects of filmmaking. But for me, directing was always the thing that I looked at. I was like, that's what I want to do. And when I would fashion, my own work, it was always putting myself in that position because it's what I loved doing. And for me, directing kind of it's a few things. One, it's the ability to see the finished film, video, commercial, whatever it is that you're making in your head before anybody else does. So I'm, before there's even pen to paper, there's this vision in my head of what it looks like, what it feels like, and what I feel watching it. Yeah. And then communicating that to everybody else, whether it be the DP and saying, hey, visually, this is what it needs to look like because this is what I see in my head. Or with the actress, and you and I have worked together in the past, and being able to communicate, this is how I'm seeing the performance played out in my head, and finding creative ways to communicate that to different people. I love that challenge. And then seeing it come to life, I'm like a little boy on Christmas Day on set, because it's like the fruition of all these imaginations that I've had in my head, and I can now see it on a monitor. And it's so exhilarating. Yeah. I absolutely love directing for that moment. It's this high that you end up chasing forever, trying to see it, this thing that's been in your head that's been begging to get out, and then you get to see it. You're the first person who gets to see it. Yeah. And then you get to craft it and hone it and make sure two shots connect together and then ultimately tell the story. Yeah. I love that aspect, and that's why I'm a director. It's why I love what I do.
Mm-hmm. So you were in LA, right? For how many years were you
Couple
in LA?
Years.
Where are you from originally?
I'm a Navy brat. I've lived everywhere.
Wow.
Yes. But no, I was in LA for 2 years out of college. So I was young. And then after that we came to North Carolina for a little bit. And then we went up to Boston, and I worked out of the New York market and the Boston market for 5 years.
Oh, wow.
And that's really where I got my big commercial exposure. So I worked with a couple of fairly large production companies up there, as a director and as a producer. That's where I got to work with like Main Office of Tourism and, some other fairly large, national brands. And so as a commercial director, that's really where I consider my start being there in that market.
And then you moved from there to LA?
No, then I moved from there down here. So
okay.
LA was right after college.
LA was right after college.
Right.
Gotcha.
Did you?
And so were you involved in filmmaking at all when you were in LA?
Yeah. No, I PA'd, I third AC'd,
that's what you were doing.
Yeah, I would. Any gig that I could get.
Yeah.
Working on everyone's passion projects. I love California and I love Los Angeles, but one of the major things that I ran into was it's an incredibly competitive market.
Yes.
I wasn't looking for that kind of competition.
Yeah.
The thing that I've loved, especially about being here in North Carolina doing production here, is it's very collaborative. There isn't enough work for everyone to be like, saturated, but there isn't like so little work that there's only enough for one person.
Right. And we'd had that conversation when we all kind of sat down for coffee at some point, like a couple months ago. We were talking about the differences in working in LA and then working in North Carolina and here, because there's so many creative people, right? And we're all kind of scattered about, and bringing everyone together, and collaborating is you see more of that here than you will in any other market. Even when I was in Atlanta, I bring this up a lot, but in Atlanta, it was like very crabs in a barrel. Everyone clamoring to be on top, and there was no sense of camaraderie. We're in this together. We're building and creating together. And so that's what I do love about being in North Carolina and having all these people come from all these different places and working together on these projects. Because like what you just said, LA is just, as an actor, I didn't experience it as I lived there for like a month. I lived in LA for like a month, but and this was before I really had gotten into like film and acting and whatnot. I was doing like web TV hosting at the time, but I wasn't auditioning yet. And so I didn't get to experience the level of competition that you have in LA, but all my friends that were actors were telling me about it. And even now, the ones that are in LA, I'm just like, why are you still there?
Right.
Like, get out of there, So I never knew about it from a director's or even like camera person, sound. I didn't know it from that perspective.
Right. Well, it's a town. Filmmaking is an incredibly hard field to make it in. Period. There is a major disparity between those who have made it and those who have not, both financial and in opportunity.
Yeah.
And LA is just one of those towns that I've my experience was you could work with somebody, pour your heart and soul and passion into something, and they might get their ticket, but they're not going to bring anybody with them. And that's hard. Like it's really, that can be a hard thing. And I wanted to be in a place where, and I really have, one of the things I really appreciate about this market here is this is a place where you get to bring people with you. So if you're gonna make it to the next level, you take all the people who helped you get there with you. And it's a small enough town that you're never more than one point of contact away from knowing everybody.
Right.
Everybody knows everybody else, and your reputation matters. And there are people in this, there are people in Raleigh who have a reputation of not working well with others.
Yeah.
But there are also people who have a great reputation of working well and being collaborative. And I think that those people tend to create really good networks, and it makes it so you can find a talent pool very quickly to produce anything at almost any level that you want.
Yeah.
So as a creative, as somebody who wants to create really engaging content that's thought-provoking, it's good to know that there are people who can do that. Because I don't think a director should be the most talented person in the room. In fact, at any given thing, I think they should be one of the least talented people. They have to be able to communicate their vision to people more talented than themselves to make that thing.
Yeah.
And I think that's a unique part of the art making process of film production. I can't do what you do. I am not an actor. However, I have a deep understanding of how to talk to actors and actresses.
You're very good at it, I will say.
And communicate that, the needs and the desires of a given moment. I'm not the most talented DP, but I surround myself with incredibly talented DPs. I'm not the most talented gaffer or hair and makeup artist, but I know what I want. And if I'm doing all that I need to do is I need to just be the best communicator on set. If I'm the best communicator on set, then everybody else who's better at any individual aspect of the art of filmmaking will make something better.
Yeah. Working with other people who are really talented is the goal. And that's how we all come together and like make really amazing projects. Because you and the first time we worked together was like, what, 10 years ago?
It was a long time ago. That was when we were down here originally.
Yeah.
We shot that. That ad. I don't even remember who it was for. I'll be totally honest. Yeah. I was driving over here and I was trying to think, who was that ad for? But it was with Trimark Digital. They were the agency of record.
Okay.
And we shot in that old abandoned office building.
Yes.
And
wait, was it for Lowe's or Home Depot or something?
No, I don't think it was. No. But I remember we had to build like a bunch of like moving graphics with it. So like there was a bunch of clean plates and all of that associated with it. That ad won a telly. It won a silver telly.
I remember you told me, and I was like, hey.
Yeah. But I don't even remember who it was for.
Yeah, that's so funny. Yeah, because that was a long time ago. That was before I moved and then came back, and that was before you moved and came back. And
well, it was around the time. It was at that same time actually that North Carolina lost its tax credit.
That's right, and that's one of the reasons why I left.
It's one of the reasons that I left.
Yeah, because I wanted to go where the incentives were going,
right?
Which is what took me to Atlanta.
I mean, overnight production. So two things happened simultaneously in North Carolina. This was probably 2014, 2015. We had the tax incentives left, and then like a month later was the bathroom bill.
What's the bathroom bill?
Remember the bill in Charlotte that said that transgenders could go to any bathroom they wanted, and then the Republican backlash to that, and all of that. And so, like in the course of like 3 months, every production left the state, either because of the tax incentives being gone or the toxic political environment.
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden, like obviously, I was doing okay. I was doing commercials, some local commercials and things like that. But my ambitions were much higher, and all of the opportunity for that ambition left this area.
Yeah.
And so, so we packed up and we moved up north, and then came back once the tax credits were back. And, at that point I was much further along in my career. And my thought was very much, I can go to a place like Austin, or I can go to a place like Chicago, and I can be a small fish in a very big pond. Right. Or I can come to a place like Raleigh, and I can be a decent sized fish in a small pond.
Sure, yeah.
And it's worked out pretty well.
Yeah.
So obviously, as a director, I work like the most visible part of the job as a director is working with actors. But we very rarely get to have the opportunity to talk to the actors and ask, what is it that you want when a director is directing you? So I'm curious. So like when you're working with a director, and I'm going to say when you're working with a good director. So you've probably worked with a whole caliber of directors from, really poor to really great. What is it that sets a director apart in your mind as being, oh, that's really good direction?
I think, what you had touched on earlier, you said having the full vision, a lot of times the director is the writer, so they know exactly what they want to see in the project. But I think knowing what you want out of the actors is important. And for me personally, I like a director that can give me direction, but then trust me enough to be able to do the work as I've been trained to do. If I was an inexperienced actor, then I say, give me all the direction. But as someone who's been doing this for a huge portion of my life, I've spent so much time training, and I want to work with people who know that and trust me to execute properly, Yeah. And so it's like, as an actor, we get the script, we read it, we figure out the character. So we come up with the backstory, we figure out what it is that's driving the character, we figure out what the purpose is of the character in this particular setting or in this particular storyline, and then we sort of build that, right? And we hone that to the point where when we're on set, we have either become that character or we're able to fully embody it. And when a director comes in and is like, well, I don't know, change this, change that, it's kind of like, well, this is how I see the character, and this is how I've built the character, and now all of a sudden you want me to switch, something around that was not, and obviously as an actor, you want to be malleable. You want to be able to adjust to whatever the director says. But good directors trust their actors.
Yeah. Well, I think that's true of any of the positions. The first feature film that I directed, I sat down. We did our first table read with the cast, and we sat down. I went around the entire table and I asked everybody after the table read to describe to me their characters, and then I told them, your biggest job on set is actually not to act. Your biggest job on set is to defend your vision of this character.
Yeah.
If you've embodied that, and then when I say do this, if that's not something the character would do, I need you to push back and create. I think a good set has good friction between all the creatives.
Yeah.
And everybody is open to the idea of, I don't like that direction. Because I think that helps to hone, for me as a director, it helped me to hone my conviction on things. Because if you say I wouldn't, the character wouldn't do that, I have to be able to defend why they would.
Yeah. Or
I have to be able to find a better way to go about that.
It's so interesting that you're saying this now, because just yesterday I was watching it was a YouTube video on I don't even know whose channel it was, but they were talking about Sam Levinson and his controversial sort of directing and his controversial topics. So Sam Levinson directed Euphoria and now defunct The Idol, right? They canceled the second season, but in this video that I was watching, it was kind of like bringing up highlights of actors, being interviewed and talking about what it was like working on set with Sam Levinson. And I can't remember the name of the main male actor in Euphoria, the really, really tall, the popular football player one. I can't remember his name, but he was being interviewed. I think he was on Ellen, and he was saying, I read the script and, it was great. And, I have to obviously fall in line and kind of go with the direction. But, I didn't understand why there were so many nude scenes. Like a person is going to the gas station and they're topless. Like, why? It's like almost like, what's the point of that? And right along the lines of that, what's so interesting about that particular set is that Minka Kelly, so she was in, I think, season 2 or maybe season 2, I want to say, of Euphoria. When it came down to her scenes and in the script, she was asked to, I guess, drop her dress, and she was supposed to be standing there naked, literally the very first scene she was in. And she approached Sam and she was like, my character wouldn't do this. It just doesn't work, doesn't make sense. And he actually said, okay. And he changed it. And I guess they ended up doing an unzipping scene, and that was it. It just showed a little bit of her back, and that was it. And the message got across. We understood what was happening. And so there's a perfect example of an actor saying to a director, this doesn't fit. This doesn't work. I don't want to do this. My character wouldn't do this,
Well, I think it's building a trust. A good director and a good producer is going to trust the team. And so you're going to trust that once you've communicated your vision, once you've communicated, when I'm working with an actress, before the shoot, before we show up on set, we're going to sit down and we're going to go over the story, and I'm going to talk about the big themes, and I'm going to talk about this is where we're going, what we're trying to accomplish, what we want to communicate, and this is where your character fits into that, whether it be the tragic heroine or the supporting character or the main character who the protagonist, you talk about that journey that this character is going to go on. Here's the arch that I see them having, the arc rather that I see them having. But I think then it kind of will diverge from there to one of two schools of thought. So there's two main types. There's several types of directors, but most of them fall into one of two camps. One would be auteur theory, which auteur theory is that there's a singular visionary for the film and everything flows out from them. And then the other is a more collaborative theory. So examples of auteur theory would be Martin Scorsese.
Okay.
He'd be a proponent of auteur theory. Quentin Tarantino would be a proponent of auteur theory, meaning that they are the singular creative.
Auteur. Okay,
correct.
AUTEUR.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, the auteur, and out from them flows everything.
Yeah.
Whereas Spielberg would fall into more of the collaborative.
Mm-hmm.
So his view of directing is that he comes on and he's going to hear everyone's ideas, and then he's going to cultivate all the ideas into a collective and say, this is the direction that we're going. For me, I fall more into that camp. I'm much more of the, I want to trust the people around me. I want to hear everyone's idea. And then at the end of the day, I'm going to say, this is the direction that we're walking and we're going to go that direction. But it's not until I've heard everyone else's process. Now, I don't think there's a right or a wrong way, but I think you have to be firm in whichever way you are.
Yeah.
If you're somebody who, firmly believes that you alone have the vision in your head, and then you flake, everyone's going to lose confidence in you. But if you're a person, or vice versa, if you're a person who sets up highly collaborative, and I'm going to tell the actors on the very first day, you defend the character, and if I say something that would be counter that, you push back, and then the first time somebody comes to you and says, hey, I don't feel like my character would do this, and then well, that's what I said to do, and you do it. So you have to be consistent. It doesn't work to be both. You have to be one or the other. But I just find the sets, as I developed my own style of directing, as I figured out who is it the stories that I want to tell and the sets that I want to be a part of. For me, the collaboration is it's a key part of the stories that I want to tell. Sure, I think I'm incredibly drawn to stories of people who come together over difficult things. Those are the stories that I'm drawn to.
Yeah.
And I often frame those in comedy, but always it's the idea of coming together. And so as a director, I think it only makes sense that I run sets where I'm expecting everybody to come together. One of the first things I say, and I say it before you show up on set, because the actors are never here for this part, but when we're having our safety meetings on sets in the morning, when I'm talking with the crew, I tell everybody, I only have one role on set, and that is nobody's allowed to go to the actors and give them direction except me.
That's smart.
Anybody on set can come to me and say, I have this idea.
Yeah.
What if we tried this? And if you do, I expect you. I don't care if you're a PA on set. I expect you to come straight to me and say, hey, I saw this thing. What if you tried this?
Yeah.
Because I've always been amazed by where ideas and inspiration can come from. And I was filming a short film a couple months back, actually. And we were on the last shot of the day, and we were going to make our day, but just barely. And everyone was super tired, and I'd done 3 takes of the last shot, and I was getting ready to call wrap, and a PA comes up to me. He says, "Hey, what if you tried this?" And then I said, "Oh, thanks for sharing that." And he walked away. I thought about it, and then I walked over to the actors, and I got down and I whispered in their ears, "I want you to change this one thing." That was about half of what this person had said to me, but that idea that they had given me sparked something else. And then we ended up doing 5 more takes with this alternate change that I just kind of honed and crafted and twisted, and it ended up being what made the film. And ultimately, it made the piece so much stronger because of this one shift. It was just a little delay in the delivery of a line, and adding a pause really emphasized this particular moment that in my initial takes on it, I didn't even think to have this moment as a thing of significance, but just adding that in made such a difference. And I think that I think that's where that collaboration is just so crucial, at least on the sets that I'm a part of.
Yeah, yeah. So what do you think about, directors like Woody Allen, who just kind of is like, and go, like let the actors do whatever they want?
Yeah, well, I think Woody Allen is an actor first.
That's true.
And I think you see this more. Did you watch Barry?
No.
I'd highly encourage it.
That's a series, right?
Yeah. They just wrapped up on HBO. Directed and showrun by Bill Hader, who's himself an incredible actor, and he directed the entire last season. And you'll notice when you watch an episode of TV that's directed by an actor versus directed by a director, you're going to see longer scenes of dialogue. You're going to see monologues. You're going to see less cutting. Yeah. The pace will be much, much, much slower. And the actors tend to have more free range. Yeah. Whereas something that's directed by somebody who's not an actor tends to be much more choreographed and tends to be much more about marks and much more about, eye lines and delivery.
Right.
And there's something to be said for both. I think the emotionality you get out of a raw performance that's not over-directed can't be found anywhere else.
Right.
But you can sometimes lose the continuity.
That's true.
Between characters and between scenes in those things.
It's like, I see what you're saying because, one of my favorite HBO shows that I've seen recently is Scenes of a Marriage.
Oh yeah, absolutely fantastic.
Amazing. And I guess it's because as an actor, that is
heavily influenced by Noah Baumbach's Marriage Story.
Yeah. And I'm just like, wow, that type of acting is just, it's so good. And yeah, and I'm just sorry, I'm just like kind of thinking on it, but that's the type of work that as an actor you just crave for, because it's like it's sort of like the stage, but it's not, you know, and you have these long scenes in these almost singular locations. It's similar for The Whale. You saw The Whale, right? Just only two locations?
Yeah,
one
very,
location,
very simple.
Yeah, and it's just these long scenes where it's just, you don't even realize that they're only in one location, and you've had so few cuts because you're so immersed in what's going on, and it does feel like you're on the stage. And as an actor, I'm just like, oh my gosh, it's just like it's screen gold for me, because that's the type of work that I want.
Well, you know? There's a term for the director who's really, really good at that. They're the actor's director.
Yeah.
That's the term for it. And it tends to be directors who are really, really good at collaborating with their actors and then letting their actors go. I think so Tarantino does a pretty good job at this, I think. And in that he does several takes at the very beginning that are his takes. He calls them, these are my takes. And it's the ones that are in his head. But then he'll say, okay, this is your take. You get to do with this whatever you want.
Wow.
And I do that from time to time on various projects, because what I find is, if I do my takes first, and I say, these are my takes, this is where we're going to do it my way. It plants ideas in the actor's head that they can build on, and then they can bring their creativity and their vision of the character into that final performance. And 9 times out of 10, it's that final performance that we use.
Yeah.
And a lot of times what will happen is I'll get my takes, they'll get their takes, and then I'll go back and I'll do more of mine, using their takes as inspiration for now how I'm going to tweak it. But I think that is an important part of the process, and I think there's something to be said for the actor's director, in that letting an actor do their job, having that trust in them, what you talked about.
Are you looking forward to Oppenheimer?
It's going to be good. It'll be Cillian Murphy's greatest performance.
I'm so excited, and I've been, following all like the press tour and what the actors have to say, and
not much these days.
I know, right? Especially now. But it was Florence Pugh, and she said that working with all the actors and working with Chris Nolan, who is just like, incredible director. He's one of my favorite directors. He probably is my favorite director. But she basically said, she was like, it's the closest that I have gotten to the stage without being on the stage. Because I'm not even really sure what she means by that. I'm like, elaborate, tell me more. But I guess it's just the way he directs. It's just gotta be, and whatever he's doing, it's working, because he pulls out the most incredible performances.
Well, one of the things you see from Christopher Nolan, and there's a few other directors who really do this, is the long take. So he'll set up multiple cameras, IMAX, huge, expensive, but still run the film through multiple cameras at the same time, and then do 8-minute takes. Like, let the scene play all the way through.
But he has it from different angles.
Correct.
Oh, that's so smart.
And so he'll shoot both sides of the performance at the same time.
Yeah.
So if it's 2 people, let's say, your bread and butter scene, which is 2 people in a conversation with each other. That's your bread and butter scene. So your typical coverage of that's going to be over the shoulder, wide. Right. Okay. That's your typical coverage. Well, what he'll do is he'll actually set up all 3 cameras to get all 3 angles, and then he'll just let that scene go all the way through. And then he'll do it again. And then he'll do it again. And so, to Florence Pugh's point, that feeling like a stage performance, there's no cutting between lines. Yeah. There's no, you say your line, okay, cut, let's do that line again. Yeah. It's, you play out the entire scene. And then each performance ends up feeling very different, because you're building off of what the other actor is giving you. And
I actually prefer that type of, that's my preference as far as like if I'm on set and if I had to choose like how I want to do the scene, because you as the actor, you get in your character and you're ready and you're prepped emotionally, and you have to do this long drawn out emotional scene and you're crying, or it's you're holding back the tears, but it's there and your nose is getting red, and then all of a sudden the director yells cut and you're like, okay, let me try to muster this up again, you know. So it's nice. It would be, yeah, it's nice to be able to do a full long scene, and then, you know, you finish the scene and then you can kind of reset yourself and then you do the scene again, because it's hard having to go from like this really high stakes moment or really emotional moment to suddenly, okay, cut, you know, hair and makeup, let's get the powder, you know what I'm saying? Like, you need some water, you know. It's like,
so
okay, totally taken out of the moment.
We were filming a musical several years ago now, and I was directing, and we had this one song that needed to be in it. That the original song is fairly upbeat and fairly poppy, but the moment that I needed it to fit in the film actually needed to be incredibly soft instead of quiet, and incredibly like deeply sorrowful. So the song that I had that needed to go didn't match the mood that I needed it to have. And I was working with somebody who's an incredible vocalist, but not an actress. And so I also needed to get this incredibly powerful performance out of somebody who had no acting experience. So what we did in this situation, I met with her for the 3 days leading up to it for about 4 hours each day, and we rehearsed the song together. And my plan was I took all instrumentation out of it. It was just going to be her voice, and then I gave her an in-ear, and I had a pianist playing on a keyboard 3 rooms away, so that she could keep with the melody.
Yeah.
But the pianist was following her, not the other way around. So she wasn't to follow the piano was to follow her. And then what I did to prepare on set, again, not an actress, so she's this being able to come into and out of character. That's a thing I knew was going to be a struggle. So I talked to everybody on set. We got there 4 hours in advance of the shoot that day, so that everything was built when she got there. And when I said nobody under any circumstances is to even make eye contact with her. I don't want anybody to speak to her. If she asks you a question, I want you to literally turn around and walk away.
Why'd you do that?
I wanted to create an atmosphere where she felt isolated.
Oh, interesting.
So the moment the character was going through was one of deep isolation. And
okay, that makes sense. I
wanted her to feel that deep isolation. Whenever I spoke to her, I only spoke in a whisper. I kept my voice low, I kept it gravelly, and I kept deep eye contact so that it was just her and me. Even when we were in hair and makeup, I told the makeup artist, I do not want you chit-chatting with her. I want this to be quiet. And it was a makeup process. It was probably a 2-hour makeup process.
And so she had no clue.
She had no clue.
Wow.
I did not warn her ahead of time. So by the time she got to set, she was already like on edge.
Yeah.
She was emotional. She was on edge. And then I sat down with her and I said, okay, here's how we rehearse this. Let's remember, here's your marks for this. Here's your mark for this. I'm not going to call cut. I said, we're going straight through this. And it was a 5-minute scene. We got it. We shot the whole thing in one take. And it was amazing. I did a second. The second take, she cried.
Wow.
Which, I mean, you know, as an actress, that's incredibly hard to get to.
Yeah.
Like, to find that emotional space.
Yeah.
And it was this beautiful performance of this song that was so far from the original.
Wow.
But so deep in this moment. And we got it all. We had, in the final film, it's the cut as seen. There's no cuts.
Wow.
It's a full 5-minute piece with one angle, no cuts, and we hold on it. And everybody who watches it, I mean, you feel the emotion.
Wow.
It's one of my favorite, like as a director, it's probably one of the most satisfying things I've ever done, because it was very little about how I directed in the moment and very much the preparation that went into it. And I think, you know, you were talking about as an actress, you know, you want to be able to find that emotion and then stick with it. I think that applies to more than just you and your acting partner. I think creating an environment that your actors can succeed in is incredibly important. And especially, I do a lot of work with child actors. That's another situation where you really have to, you know, if the scene needs to be fun and upbeat, you want the set to be fun and upbeat.
Sure,
but if the scene needs to be serious, you need the set to be serious.
Yeah.
Because how hard is it for you as an actress if you're trying to do this deeply emotional scene and you're coming right off of 5 minutes ago, the gaffer telling a joke to the gaff and everybody cracking up in the corner.
Yeah.
Like, I think,
totally.
you know, you're good, but I don't think anybody should have to be that good.
Yeah.
I think that the atmosphere on set should match the atmosphere of the scene. I think that's an important part of the director's job.
Yeah.
Is you're directing everybody.
Yeah.
And everything needs to go towards that performance.
I can't remember which director it was. It may have been Tarantino, and he doesn't allow cell phones at all on set. And that might be like a standard across the board for like
privacy
reasons,
security.
But I feel like I read something a long time ago about a director, maybe not even, or maybe it was actors. I'm not sure what it was, but basically, they keep the emotion going, or they stay in their character. I know a lot of actors stay in character even when they call cut and they're sitting in their trailers and they're still that character. I think Denzel Washington does that a lot.
Yeah, method acting.
Yeah. I'm not really that type of actor. I do like to have fun, and I joke around a lot. So, if I just came off of a crying scene and everyone around me is like super emotional, I'm like, it's okay, guys, it's okay. It's not real, But you're right. It is hard to go from laughing to suddenly like, let me be serious, like that is hard. So, yeah. But
and I'm sure your audience knows, but it was a surprise to me when I found out that you're also a writer.
Yeah.
And as a writer, I think writing has to be one of the most defeating jobs in the world if you're not also directing, because you have to write something and then you hand it to somebody who's then going to take it and make it maybe wasn't what was in your head. So right. I'm curious, as an artist, how do you reconcile writing and knowing that what you made is art, but then seeing it and being different than maybe what you envisioned?
Right. Yeah, because I have written several projects and then have the director like go on and do what the director does with it. And then I've also been the writer that is also the director. And for the most part, the projects that I've done were short films. So it pretty much stayed very close to the writing. As far as features are concerned, I think the way I write, it's there's the art factor, yes. And there's the sort of like, I build it up and I, create the arcs and do the storylines and stuff. But for me, my writing, I always have like a layer underneath it that says something deeper. So as long as that deeper message stays within the story, I'm actually pretty open to changes that need to be made to maybe push the story further, or push, like let's say a scene needs to be added that will give this character a little bit more meaning in what they're doing or something like that. I'm open to that. And as far as that's concerned, I can let that go. I can say, you know what, I've written something great. I love it. But, I'm talking to the director or whoever else is involved, and they say, let's maybe go in this direction. I'm more open so long as, like I said, the message underneath stays the same.
What are the types of messages you like to tell? Like, I think everyone has their worldview or their like the projects that when they write, they really want to make sure that this is communicated. What are the things that really kind of attract you as a writer?
Yeah, I like to tell stories that have to do with sort of like enlightening, like a character coming into enlightenment.
Why is that?
I guess it's my own personal, what I've personally been through. The struggles, the trials, the tribulations, all that, and me sort of finding meaning in life and finding purpose.
Trauma makes for great writing material.
And literally, like pretty much everything that I've written is loosely based off of my own experiences, or my own maybe worldview on things. And so I want to make sure that that's kind of trickled into my writing. And it depends. Like my novel, for example, is first person, and that character is very loosely based off of my own life. A lot of the situations that character went through, I personally went through. And so it's in there and it's very descriptive. But then there's a lot of scenes that are also very descriptive that I've never been through at all. I may have heard stories of like my friends going through that, but I wanted to make sure that it was in there because it helped sort of drive the message. But as far as like screenplays, for example, or really, I guess anything really that I've written, the underlying messages are almost like a character awakening, someone awakening to maybe the truths around them. Like I said, reaching enlightenment, but what is enlightenment, right?
Sure.
To me, enlightenment is when someone realizes that the world around them is not what they thought it was, and they have to sort of do some deep soul searching to figure it out, or situations are thrown at them that force them to go through that deep soul searching. And a lot of times that character hits rock bottom, and has to sort of pull themselves out. There's no one else around that can help them through that situation except themselves. And I mean, I personally have been through that, and that's probably why it gets trickled into a lot of my writing. But yeah, I think that's that tends to be my messages.
So then, as a writer, the goal I think for any writer is that a top tier director takes their script and turns it into something that audiences can view. But I also think it's important, especially in the era that we live in, and especially as a female artist, that respect be shown to the creators of sources. So, as in the case of the writer, being a writer on a script, you are the author of that original idea.
Yeah.
What would make you? But I also recognize that, for instance, in my case, I get scripts all the time, and when I take a script, I'm going to adapt it.
Yeah.
Like I'm going to take that script, and I have to believe in it before I can pour my heart and soul into it. And so there's going to be a deviance between the script that somebody's written and the script that is shot. What would make you, as a writer, feel respected and feel that your original intent was being heard, as a director is taking the baby from you and then owning it for themselves?
That metaphor right there is like so. Ooh.
But it is.
Poignant,
when we create this thing, it's mine.
Yeah, it's my baby, and now I have to.
Right.
I'm like someone else is adopting it and raising it.
Right. And I don't want them to, but I also kind of want them to.
Yeah, but I want to we're co-parenting.
Right. What would make you feel like the time and the investment that you've made in this story is being respected, while also recognizing that it's going to change?
I think as long as the story gets told the way it's written, actually, okay, that's probably not
the words that are on the page, they must not be changed.
Yeah, no, it's to me, it's the story, right? Because as a writer, I'm a storyteller. So if I'm telling a story, little bits and pieces here and there can change throughout. But as long as the story is told the way the story is written, then that to me makes sense. Like if a director came in and was like, I don't like that ending, or I don't like how this is happening, let me just change that. To me, I'm like, well, then why? No, like we're telling this story, and yeah, the dialogue can change because as an actor, because that's another thing, I'm an actor, so the way I write, especially for the screen, I am a little bit more open because whereas if I were to write a novel and then hand it off to a publisher and then they were like, change this and change that, I'm kind of like, ooh. But as for if it's written for the screen, I understand that as the actor, sometimes I get a script and I'm like, as the character, I wouldn't say it like that. And so those open. Words
will not feel natural.
It doesn't feel natural. And so I try to write for an actor. I have never really thought about writing for a director, but I write for the actor. And so I understand that if the words or the dialogue has to change, I understand that. So I'm not so stuck on that. So I'm not sure if I'm answering your question properly, but I think as long as the story is told, like if scenes need to be added to help sort of drive it, I'm totally fine with that. I can't speak for other writers. Some other writers might be like, no, it needs to be like this, and they get really offended.
It's a deeply personal thing. I mean, I've worked with ghostwriters in the past. I mean, those people have a world's thickest skin because they'll write something and then it looks absolutely like nothing they wrote, and they also don't get credit for it. So there's definitely a wide gambit. So it can't be. But I'm just curious for you, like that process for you. Because I think that needs to be a part of our dialogue in this industry is how do we respect the work of other artists?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because, you and I are in talks on a project. Don't want to discuss anything else, but, I liked what you had said, had sort of proposed, which is having the writer do a lot of the rewrites, rather than the director. And I'm not sure if this is standard across industry, but, I think having the writer as involved as possible in any changes, that way the writer can say, actually, we need to keep this because it's really central to the way I see the story, or, okay, yeah, sure, we can throw that out. I can rewrite it or whatever, and I don't know for other directors, but I feel like you're pretty, you work well with writers.
That's good.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, what do you think? How do you feel on that?
It's different
because you're a writer.
Yeah, I do
and so
write.
How do you feel about that?
I don't write things for other people to direct, and so it's actually kind of a black hole in my own knowledge. I only write things that I direct.
Interesting.
I haven't written anything that I've handed off to anybody else, and so if I'm writing something, I'm writing it with the intention of making it, which puts, I think it means that I would feel very wary handing my script to somebody else. Like if I wrote this thing and I feel very passionate about it, I would feel very wary handing that off to somebody else to go make. But there's certainly a point where, when you've handed to somebody, they've written the check, you no longer own that property.
No, it's like so weird.
And I've taken scripts from people that I didn't write. The first feature that I directed, I didn't write it. I developed the story with the writer, but the writer actually wrote it, and then I took that script and I very heavily adapted it. But I worked with the writer all throughout that process to make sure that we were staying true to the themes of the story. But a lot of the times, even in that case, I had developed the themes before the script was even written. So I think it has to be a collaborative process, and I think that there has to be a good way for a director to communicate his care for the story, even if that story is going to change. And understanding, I think that the important thing for me is understanding the central themes and not changing the central themes. I think if a director is being brought onto something, that director needs to believe in those themes. If they don't, then there's probably somebody out there who's better to tell that story.
Well, it's kind of what you said earlier about that gaffer, whoever had kind of whispered into your ear and was like, hey, what about this? And then you sort of took that idea or that you were inspired by that idea, and you kind of told that to the actor, and then it subsequently created a whole sort of new scene in the same scene, obviously, but
a new feeling for that moment.
Feeling. And I feel like that kind of works also with writers, like writers. As a writer, me personally, I get inspired by everyone that I'm working with on a particular project. So if someone came to me and was like, hey, or if the director was like, well, what about that? To me, I'm like, oh yeah. And it opens up a whole new side of the story that I may or may not have already, seen. And so that's why, as a writer, I personally think it's important to stay open and not be so rigid and stuck. Because you could be dry, it's just like when you're driving, right? And you think you're thinking about something, and then all of a sudden, a car passes and you see their license plate, and then it says something and you're like, oh my gosh, and it makes you think about something totally different.
Right.
That's how it is. That's how life is, And so as a writer, unless it's like you're telling a historical story, right? Or, like something that actually happened and you need to stick to the truth, right? If it's fiction and you can sort of change and shape it the way you want it to shape it, you've written it one way, and then someone comes in and just says one thing or makes a suggestion, it's kind of like, oh, actually, yeah, I could have that scene go that way, because then it might loop back in with the scene. So I don't know. So I do think it is important to stay true to your art, and it is important to stay true to what it is that you've written, but staying open is also important in my mind, because that keeps the collaboration, that makes the creativity a collaborative process, and we're all involved in it, especially in filmmaking. Because you had said this before, you said filmmaking is one of the only art forms where you can't do it by yourself.
Correct.
It takes everybody, and that includes the writers. Like, so if the writer's like, no, I'm gonna do it this way, it's kind of like, well, what are you doing in this process? If you want to be a writer and stick to your guns this way, write your novels, write your books. But in filmmaking, we've got to all be kind of open to each other, right?
Well, I think it's the thing to understand, even in the middle of the strike. I think we often miss out on the fact is that the producers are even the producers are a part of that art. We need the money to make it.
Yeah, for sure.
So I think I'm hopeful that we can reach a place with the various guilds that are on strike right now, that are mutually beneficial. But I think we need the studios on board. We need the financiers on board with the direction that we're going, because otherwise none of us can afford to do this, because it cannot be done alone. This isn't something that I can go in my garage and work on over the next 5 years and walk out with a TV show on the other side.
Right.
It doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
I need, you need incredibly talented people, and those incredibly talented people need a way to make a living.
Yeah.
And so I think, I firmly stand with, the WGA and SAG, and in their fight to get better wages, and better opportunities, especially, with the idea of writers' rooms. I think that there has to be some sort of a standard engagement length for certain things, because you don't want to turn this industry into a gig economy where you move from gig to gig to gig. You want people to be able to have some stability in their work. At the same time, we do need to make sure that it's an industry where it can make money. Because as long as it's making money, there'll continue to be financiers who will give us money to make this stuff.
Yeah.
They are a part of the collaborative process, in the same way that writers and directors and actors are a part of that creative process.
Do you feel like, and I had this conversation with my previous guest, and we were talking about music in this case, but do you feel like Hollywood or like the film industry has maybe over industrialized everything and has sort of lost touch with the fact that this is art, and we all are working together?
Yes and no. Hollywood is such a big entity.
I know.
So like, I just watched the new Mission Impossible film, and I was listening to interviews afterwards with some of the actors, and they were talking about the art of what they were making. Well, that's as big a budget. It was $290 million is what they spent on the production of that film.
Right.
So if you're going to say this is an industrial complex film, that would certainly fit that category.
Especially because it was like Mission Impossible, like what, 45 or something? Like what's the
At the same
5?
time, you look at the tremendous amount of effort that goes in by so many individuals.
Yeah.
There are certainly people who I think have business incentives in mind behind the making of this. But I don't think there's actually many people at the creative level that have lost sight of what they're doing and why they're doing it. And for almost everybody, below the line, I think there is a certain level of creative output that comes, and I would consider that art.
Yeah, and also because, like, even as you're talking, I'm sort of thinking, you're inspiring me. But even in these big franchise, productions, they have to write that story for that Mission Impossible 5 or whatever. They have to write the story, which means that art has to, there is the art aspect, obviously.
And there's a production designer who has to go and figure out what the scenes are going to look like. And there's a costume designer who has to make the wardrobes. And there's the same things that exist in an independent feature exist in a multi-$100 million Hollywood studio production.
Yeah.
And so it's just, when you have more money, you have more resources, you can do it at a larger scale. But it is the same process, which is why, I talk to students all the time about making short film. Making a short film and making a movie are the exact same process.
Yeah.
The timeline has just shrunk. It's going to
take the budget's shrunk.
And the budget's shrunk, right. But, but I think I was working with a guy from Disney a few weeks ago. We were sitting down, we were talking, and we were, commenting on the fact that really filmmaking is, at its core, it's just problem solving. And the more money you have, the bigger the solutions you might have to whatever problem you're facing.
Yeah.
And the less money you have, the more creative you have to be with the solution. But everything all it is I have a problem. Even, I was working with a writer who will go unnamed on a script. And I read the first draft of the script, and it was, here's the problems. Let's talk about how you overcome those problems. So it happens on the script level. And then when you get on set, you're going to get on set and realize, oh, shoot, half the wardrobe didn't show up. That's a problem. How do we overcome that problem?
That's true.
The 35 millimeter is not quite wide enough, but the 24 is too wide. How do we overcome this problem? Like it's a constant state of problem solving, and I think, and that goes for every person, every train of it. Wow. Because making a film, in a lot of ways, it's like a giant puzzle.
Yeah.
And it takes a lot of people, to move those pieces around. It's like a completely white puzzle.
Yeah.
So it's so many pieces, and you don't know.
Right, and there's like no color.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And
you don't know what piece fits in like what section.
But totally. If everyone does their job correctly, then you can slowly start putting those puzzle pieces together, and when you're all done, it's this beautiful white canvas that you can then paint a picture on.
There you go.
The illustration breaks down at some point.
Totally. So if you had the biggest budget to make whatever, what type of, like, what would you do? Would you do like fantasy trilogy, or what would you make?
What would I make?
like a James Bond type of, you know?
I have to be careful because I'm in the middle of a conversation with a company about that project right now. So I can't go into specifics, but
Okay.
the types of stories that I'm deeply drawn to, I'm drawn to stories of people who overcome loss,
Yep. Okay.
and I'm drawn to comedy. And I think the intersection of the two is really where I find my sweet spot.
Yeah.
It's stories where I think loss and grief are central to what it means to be human. And we often I don't think we spend enough time looking at what does it mean to lose something. And I also think that comedy is one of the best vehicles to communicate with people. Often we tell these deeply dramatic stories,
Yeah.
and the 10 people who watch it are deeply moved, and it doesn't get a broader audience. But if you can find a way to make somebody laugh and then give them a deeper meaning behind that laughter, I think that you've told a story that can actually change people's minds.
Yeah.
So those are the stories that I'm drawn to. I would love to direct for a Lucasfilm or a Star Wars piece someday, but
I could see you doing that.
That's
I see you
that's
doing
that's
that.
down the road. But you take the small steps along that journey. It starts with directing your first short feature, your first short, and then it starts with doing a couple of documentaries, and then you do your first feature, and you're like on top of the world, and then you realize that there's so much more to go, and so I'm continually growing on my journey, and working, every day I'm working with people who I've looked up to. I think you get on those sets and you're like, oh my gosh, that's the person I've admired for so long. I'm finally getting to the sets where I'm getting to see those people, interact with those people.
Wow.
And so you continue to grow, you continue to push, so that someday you look back on your career and you say, wow, I didn't quite make it far enough. But it's way farther than you would have thought you would have gotten when you started.
Yeah.
I don't think as a creative, I don't think there's ever a point where you say that was enough. But if you pour, for me at least, the satisfaction comes when you pour everything that you have and everything that you believe into the story that you're trying to tell. And if you can walk out the other side and have the satisfaction of an audience saw it and they got it, then that's what matters.
Yeah.
Everything else is icing on the cake.
Totally. Well said. I like what you just said. That's great. Well, cool. Well, I appreciate you so much. I'm so glad you joined me today.
Absolutely. This is fun.
Yeah, this was super fun. I'm definitely going to have you back.
Okay.
But if you want to give your handle, your socials, or website or anything for anyone.
Yeah. If you want to see my work, you can go to 541code.com. If you want to follow me on Instagram, I'm Peter the Director. I think those are the only things I really push these days.
Okay.
So yeah, see my work. Follow me on Instagram. I rarely post, but when I post, I promise you it's worth it.
Awesome. Very good. Well, thanks so much for joining us. And once again, this is Life and Art with Nicole, and we'll see you in the next episode.